So, yeah, my name is Chris, and I've written a book about the Five Koshas and the relationship between the Five Koshas and the 8 limbs. And so Azud asked me if I wouldn't mind presenting over that, even though I think you guys have already read the book, some of you. But this will be a good review and a good refresher for those of you that have read the book and for those of you that have not. Some of this might be new, but I think that you'll find that an understanding of this cosmology of the 5 koshas or Panchakosha will help you understand the purpose of yoga, the purpose of Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharna. Why do we do all of these 8 limbs? Why do we practice the 8 limbs of yoga? Well, it's actually because of this older cosmology of the 5 koshas. Next. And so what are the 5 koshas? Well, koshas are layers that comprise our manifest being. So koshas are the coverings of the soul. They can be thought of as like Russian dolls or layers of an onion. As you peel away the layers of the onion, you get closer and closer to the core of the onion. Okay? Or Russian dolls. As you take one doll away, you find there's another doll within the dolls. And as we practice yoga, the same thing happens. So we transcend each layer one at a time, each Russian doll one at a time, or layers of the onion. We peel away more and more layers until we arrive at our core, which is the Atman, or the soul. And this is ultimately the goal of yoga. And it's a goal that unfortunately is not talked about very much, especially in the modern yoga studio. With a basic asana practice, this is not a goal that is arrived at, certainly, through just a basic asana practice. And so, with an understanding of the koshas, we're able to go deeper into our yoga practice. It's no longer just about asana. It's about so much more. So much more. And so the philosophy of the koshas originally comes to us via the Taittiriya Upanishad. The Taittiriya Upanishad is about 1,000 years older than the Yoga Sutras. So this is a very ancient cosmology. The Upanishads are commentaries over the Vedas, which are even older. So this idea of layers of the body, or layers of our being, is an ancient one. This is nothing new. This is not a modern invention, like so much of things you hear in yoga classes. This is the real stuff. Okay, and oftentimes it's referred to as Panchakosha. Pancha just means 5. So if you hear Panchakosha, it's just referring to the 5 koshas.
So
okay?
When we hear the term Panchakarma?
Panchakarma, the 5 karmas. That's an Ayurvedic cleansing program that you would go through, and there's 5 different main processes within that program. So yeah, oftentimes in yoga terminology, you'll hear Sanskrit numbers and not realize they're numbers. For example, Ashtanga actually means 8 limbs. Ashta is 8. Chaturanga, for example, means 4 limbs. Chatura, I think, is 4, for example. And actually we get the tridosha. Tri is actually 3, and that's one of these cognates that we have in English and Spanish, Latin, and many other languages. And that actually comes from ancient Indo-European, where Sanskrit also comes from. Yeah, these are my books. This is the Spanish version, which was just recently published within the month. Actually, about a month ago, that was published and is selling on Amazon in places like Spain, Mexico, and places like that. And the English version is sold in more than 12 countries now, thousands of copies. So, next. These are just a couple of interesting pictures that I found online that give you a visual representation of the 5 koshas, and we'll go over them one at a time. But here you see the physical body, the energetic body, emotional body, wisdom body, bliss body. And so this just gives you some visual reference to look at when we talk about the koshas. And oftentimes they're related to chakras, which I don't like, because chakras was actually something that came much later, the idea of chakras. And really so if you see something like that, just know that the chakras have no relation with the koshas except for the Pranamaya Kosha. The Pranamaya Kosha, the energetic body, is composed of chakras. Okay? But sometimes people try to mix these two systems, and I find it to be quite clunky. It doesn't always, it's not as seamless as people would like it to be. But just know that the Pranamaya Kosha is your energetic body, and it is composed of chakras and nadis and these types of things. But I'll talk about that in a minute. Next. So again, the example of the Russian dolls. You can think of koshas as being like Russian dolls. Every time you take a doll apart, there's another doll inside, and you keep going, keep going, keep going, until hopefully there's no more dolls left. There's nothingness, which is actually everythingness too. The great paradox of the soul, or infinite consciousness, or Atman, or Brahman. And so the idea is that we peel away these Russian dolls, we peel away the layers of the onion until we arrive at our infinite core. So the first kosha we're going to talk about, we're going to move from the densest layer of our being to the least dense. Sometimes people teach koshas in the opposite order, actually. And they will teach them from the least dense to the most dense, but I like to start at the Anandamaya Kosha, the most dense, because that's where your yoga practice starts. You don't start at the soul and move to the body. You start at the body, or the physical layer, and you move toward the soul one step at a time. Okay? So the first layer is the Anandamaya Kosha. Ana, in Sanskrit, means food. Okay, so this is the food sheath, or the food layer. Sometimes we translate kosha as sheath. And so this is the food layer. Amaya, so all of the koshas end in maya, or amaya. Amaya actually means full of. Okay, so full of food, or the food sheath, the food layer. Okay, so this is the sheath of our normal physical body. And the reason it's called the food sheath is because the old adage, you are what you eat, is absolutely true. And of course, our body comes from, literally, the food that we put in it. And so every cell of our body is composed of the food that we ate. Okay? So that's why it's called Anandamaya Kosha. And this layer is actually typically what our consciousness is identified with. We walk through life, we move through life with the false notion that we are this. That we are this body, this impermanent, constantly changing vessel of the soul. With just a little discernment, we can easily see that can't be the case. And so, I mentioned before that we're going to move from the densest layer to the least dense. So, we know that everything in the universe is vibratory. This is proven by physics, quantum physics. So, we know that everything in the universe is vibratory. Everything vibrates at a certain frequency. And so, the Anandamaya Kosha vibrates at the densest frequency. This is we can think of ourselves as interdimensional beings. And so you can actually think of each kosha as a dimension, a different dimension, if you want to think in those terms, if it helps you to conceptualize what we're talking about. And so actually, the physical dimension is the densest dimension. It has the most physicality to it. All of these are physical layers. Anything with vibration is physical. That's important to understand. Some people think, oh, the astral body or the mind is not physical. It's absolutely physical. It absolutely produces vibration. Anything in the vibratory manifest realm is physical. So, or material. So, the Anandamaya Kosha is the densest, most physical, you could say, layer of our being. It has the densest frequency or vibration. Next is the Pranamaya Kosha. Prana means vital energy or life force energy, sometimes it's translated. This is a concept that exists in many ancient cultures, and of course in China it's called Qi. I believe in Egypt it's called Qi. But anyway, or Ka. And so, anyway, this is pretty typically agreed upon layer of our existence that unfortunately in the modern world is oftentimes forgotten. This sheath is known by many names: the energetic body, subtle body, pranic body, astral body, vital body, light body, etheric body. So different systems have labeled this particular sheath in different ways, but it's the same thing. So if you hear astral body, one person says astral body, another person says subtle, another person says light body, etheric body, vital body. It's all the same thing. Okay, it's just your energetic self, your subtle self. Okay, and it's sort of a light blue copy, if you will, of your physical body. It goes a little deeper than that. But this is what produces the aura of a person. When you see someone's aura, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the Pranamaya Kosha, the energetic part of us is producing actually something that can be detected by sensitive people. And so this is also called the psychic body. Okay? And so people that have psychic gifts or gifts of healing, this is what they're working with. So it's kind of a misnomer to call something a spiritual gift, when in fact it's simply a psychic gift or an astral gift. For example, I know people that are healers, or that have telepathic abilities or psychic abilities, that, to be honest, aren't the most spiritually grounded or spiritually awake individuals. So it's a bit of a misnomer to call these astral or energetic gifts spiritual gifts. It's simply an energetic or psychic ability that someone may express in a particular incarnation due to past karma or due to previous experiences working with these energies and these types of things. So if someone is working at that level, this is what they're working with, this sheath, this Pranamaya Kosha. It's also important at this point to iterate that all of these sheaths interpenetrate one another, and they're all connected. So we shouldn't necessarily, and this is kind of a difficult concept to grasp, but we shouldn't think of each sheath as having its own separate existence. Nothing has separate existence. Everything is connected, and so all of these sheaths, all of these layers actually interpenetrate one another and affect each other. For example, this Pranamaya Kosha, this energetic sheath, can manifest physical effects. For example, this is where we experience emotions and energies, subtle energies. So if we're experiencing negative emotional states, this can have a physical effect on your physical body. Likewise, if you're experiencing some type of physical trauma, disease, injury, or something like that, it can have a definite effect on your energetic body. So all of these layers interpenetrate one another and affect each other. So they don't have a separate independent existence. Nothing has a separate independent existence. Okay? Everything is interconnected in this web of consciousness. And so we say that the Pranamaya Kosha is the second densest layer of our being. It's just a frequency down from the physical body. Okay? So this is why, for example, thoughts, the next kosha they'll talk about, we can't necessarily see thoughts. Okay? Although some people can, I guess, but we can see energy sometimes. Actually, a lot of people have this gift. They can see auras, they can see and sense and feel energies, perceive these things, right? And that's because this layer has more physicality than something like mind or bliss or identity or these other layers that we'll talk about that are less dense and have a much more subtle vibration. So this vibrates just a scotch lower than the physical body, and that's why people are more able to perceive this layer. Okay? The next layer is the Anandamaya Kosha, sometimes Pranamaya Kosha. It's different in different texts. You'll see it spelled differently, but Manamaya or Manomaya. And Manas means mind in Sanskrit. Okay, so this is the layer of the mind. So this sheath represents the mental layer of our manifest being. And again, it is physical. It is vibratory. So this is important to understand. We don't typically think of thoughts as being physical, but they do in fact produce vibrations. I just took somebody up to was it EEG? They put the electrodes on your head, and they can literally measure different brainwave patterns, alpha, theta, gamma, beta, all these different delta, all these different brainwaves when you're having thoughts. And also when you're having specific thoughts or you're having specific memories, it will light up a specific part of the brain. So we know actually that thoughts do in fact create vibration. Thoughts do in fact have physicality. So these thoughts, these memories, these desires, they are physical. They do have vibration. They are vibratory. Okay? And so this sheath represents the mental layer of our being. We experience thoughts, memories, visions, imagination, fantasy in the Anandamaya Kosha. So this is the sheath where all of the mental phenomenon occur. Okay? Again, our consciousness is typically identified with the mind and its stream of thoughts. However, it is possible to witness objectively this stream of thoughts. And again, with just a little discernment, we're able to understand we are in fact not our thoughts. We are not our memories. We are not our story. We are not our desires. We are not visions, fantasies, imagination. We are none of these things because we can witness these things from a higher vantage point. Therefore, we must be this witness, this observer that can observe all of this phenomenon objectively. And so the mental sheath, we would say, is the third densest layer of our being. Okay? It vibrates below the Pranamaya Kosha. And again, all these are connected. They all interpenetrate one another. For example, if I have a bad memory, what happens? When you have a bad memory, what occurs?
Maybe your heart.
In the rest of you?
Your heart might race.
Your heart could race. Okay, so that's a physical manifestation of that. What else might happen? You have a bad memory.
You might invoke a smell or an idea.
Yeah.
something you heard.
Absolutely. So it can create even more mental phenomena. What happens physically when you have a bad memory?
You might shrink up or have a chill or internally have a physical reaction.
Absolutely.
As a result.
It can elicit a physical reaction. And it can elicit an emotional or energetic reaction. Okay, so we can see how all of these sheaths affect one another. Okay? Likewise, you might smell something, physically you might smell something, and that might bring up a bad memory or a good memory. So we can see how the physical can affect the mental. Okay? These all affect one another. They all interpenetrate one another. They're all related to each other. They do not have independent existence. So that's why it's so important in a yoga class or just with your personal practice that you work on every single layer of your being. You don't want to just work on your body at the exclusion of the rest of your being. The body is one layer. Okay? Next. Anandamaya Kosha, when there's a J and an N in Sanskrit, it has sort of a G N sound, like Vijnana, or like the N would have a tilde in Spanish. So you pronounce that Vijnanamaya Kosha. Vijnana means intellect, ego, or wisdom. It depends what Sanskrit scholar you ask. They all seem to translate it slightly differently. But typically, you'll see it as intellect. In the Indian tradition, the mind is divided up into many different parts. Okay, you have the manas, which is more of the sense mind. You have the vijnana, which is the intellect. And you have the buddhi, which is higher mind. That's where we get the word Buddha from this word buddhi, which means actually higher mind. Sometimes translated as intellect. And there's actually others. So the mind is something far more complex in Indian thought. Okay? And in English we have one word for it, mind, right? So this sheath is where we experience our individuality. So in my book, I actually translate this more as ego and identity, because I feel like the Pranamaya Kosha already takes care of the intellect. If you're intellectualizing about something, if you're thinking actively about something, you're using your mind. These are thoughts that are occurring in the mental field. So I prefer, personally, this is just me, I prefer to think of this layer as our identity. And in fact, during a profound mystical experience known as Samadhi in the Indian tradition, we can transcend this sense of individuality. We can transcend this sense of separate existence, this ego. It is possible. And many people have reported that during mystical experiences they feel like they are at one with everything. Well, what does that actually mean, to be at one with everything? It means if you are in oneness, there is no you anymore. This you, this ego, this story, this individual existence no longer has any reality. It's no longer real. And so we can, through deep, profound yoga practices and meditation, we can experience this oneness or samadhi or union. Actually, yoga, the word yoga means oneness or union. So the meaning of the word yoga is also the goal of yoga practice. I mean, there are many goals to yoga practice. Good to have a healthy body, a healthy mind, and all of that. But actually, the ultimate goal is oneness, is samadhi, is the transcendence of our individual existence. This illusion that we are separate. And so this Vijnanamaya Kosha is this individual existence. It's this individuality, this separateness, this ego, self. that's existing at this layer. Okay? Next is the Anandamaya Kosha. And Ananda in Sanskrit means bliss. But not the bliss you get from eating a piece of chocolate. Not the bliss you get from, a cup of coffee or a beer or any of these temporary sense pleasures. It's something far deeper and far more meaningful and more lasting. Okay? And it's not really happening at the level of mind. It's not really happening at the level of body. It's really not even happening on an energetic level. This is a very deep layer of your being. In fact, this is the deepest layer of your being other than your soul, the Atma. So this is the last layer that you experience before you experience Samadhi, or oneness, or union. And actually, you can kind of go in and out of this layer as you're experiencing a Samadhi state. You can actually flow back and forth in and out of this layer. Okay, and so again, we must understand this is not our soul or Atman. There's still something beyond the bliss layer to be experienced. Many yogis get stuck at this layer because spiritual bliss is intoxicating. Spiritual bliss is intoxicating. In fact, the guru of my guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, used to tell my guru often actually, specifically my guru asked Paramahansa Yogananda this. He asked him, out of all the people that you wrote about in Autobiography of a Yogi, how many of those spiritual masters reached liberation, finally reached the ultimate goal? And he said, oh, not many. Not many. He said, most people are content to stay at the level of God communion because they're so intoxicated with the bliss of God communion. So they're content to just kind of hang out at that level, and they don't go all the way. There's something beyond bliss. Bliss is great. Bliss feels real good. So it's easy for us to hang out there and to think we're done. To think that, okay, game over. I'm an enlightened person. Actually, there's a state beyond all sensation. When I am feeling bliss, there's still duality. There's an I that is experiencing something. Samadhi, or union, there's no duality. There's only oneness. So there's no separate me that is experiencing anything external to me. I am experiencing myself at that point, which is infinite. Omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, infinite consciousness. So this layer has very little density and is as close as we can come to the unmanifest divine, or Shiva, within the manifest, or Shakti, realm, with the exception of the Om vibration, out of which all of creation manifests. So there is something even less dense, you could say, than the Anandamaya Kosha, and that would simply be the Om vibration. The Om vibration is the substratum, the vibratory substratum, out of which all of creation manifests. Everything comes from this very, very subtle vibration, the Om vibration. Even Anandamaya Kosha comes from this Om vibration. In the Indian tradition, it is said that all of creation manifests out of sound, manifests out of this Om vibration. Even in the Bible, it says, in the beginning there was the Word. That signifies the Om vibration, the vibratory influence out of which all of manifestation manifests. Okay? And so that's why saying Om out loud, chanting Om, is so sacred. It's such a sacred act because it is a symbol of this actual, very subtle substratum that is as close to God, if you want to call it that, as we can get in the manifest realm. So that, oming out loud, this om that we do when we chant is not the om vibration. It is a symbol of the actual om vibration. And it's a good thing to do because it does vibrate your body and does have some energetic effects.
I have a question
Sure.
about that. I don't know. I think I have read it or in our conversations before about the Om and Anandamaya Kosha and getting in communion with God. So this Om vibration, can you experience God? I mean, does God, call it that way, God or ultimate reality or whatever, has this vibration? Or at the end, there's no vibration?
So everything has vibration except God, or if you want to call it that, except, this is where it gets really complicated, where the paradoxes start. Because everything is God in the Indian tradition, okay? Shiva and Shakti, unmanifest and manifest. This is where it gets tricky. But we would say that everything has vibration except for the Atman, or the soul, does not vibrate. It is pure consciousness. When you're in the state of pure infinite consciousness, there's no vibrations, there's no vrittis. Remember, the first, or actually I believe it's the second sutra of Patanjali says Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which translated means yoga happens or yoga occurs when the fluctuations, vibrations, vrittis, in your being cease. So this union with your higher self, the union with divine, occurs once there are no more vrittis. Once all the vibrations and fluctuations cease, that is yoga. So we would say that the Atman, or God, infinite consciousness, divine, or, however you want to call that, reality, ultimate reality, does not have vibration. Everything else has vibration. So, but it is out of that unmanifest realm that the manifest realm manifests. So we could say that it's all part of one ultimate wholeness. And actually, in the experience of Samadhi, this is hard to explain, but we experience manifest things as the same as the unmanifest. So you would hear sounds, you would see things, and you would understand that is infinite consciousness. Sounds, things that you smell, see, whatever. There's no difference between the manifest and the unmanifest in Samadhi. There's only oneness and wholeness.
So you see everything as God?
Everything.
Now, I've heard and read and heard that prior to Om, or prior to the vibration or the word, you've got unpolarized white light. That would not be necessarily vibrating or have sound or unmanifest. In
the Samkhya philosophy of India, you have an incredibly complex, complicated cosmology for how the unmanifest becomes manifest. None of us know. Nobody knows. This is the great mystery. We'll maybe never know. This is the great mystery. Many people have philosophized about it, but the more you philosophize about it, the more paradoxical it becomes, and you just end up in the circular logic that continues over and over again. We don't know. That's the great mystery. How does something that's unmanifest turn into something that's manifest? We have no idea. I have no idea. I meditate every day. I've meditated for years and years. I have no idea. But again, Samkhya has probably the best take on this that I've seen, but it's incredibly complex. It's incredibly complicated. But it does deal with the Om vibration as sort of the first movement of God, or of the divine, in the manifest realm.
So we use our soul.
Mm-hmm.
Does our soul vibrate?
No.
because it's one with God.
This is consciousness, pure consciousness. What is consciousness? I mean, can you point to consciousness and say, it doesn't vibrate. It just is. It's pure existence being. There is no vibration. No vibration. Next. Okay, so moving on to the 8 limbs, and I'll bring it back and I'll explain how these two things fit together. Okay, so we're going to talk quickly about the 8 limbs of yoga. I know you guys have already learned about this some, but you probably haven't learned how the 8 limbs relate to the 5 koshas, and that's really the most important thing to understand. Without an understanding of both, we really don't have a very good grasp of why we do the yoga practices that we do. So they are, of course, yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharna, Gianna, Samadhi, and this is from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. In the Upanishads, in specific Upanishads, we find references to different limbs. There's one Upanishad that mentions 6 of them, actually, but not in this specific order. So Patanjali compiled a lot of information from different systems like Samkhya, Vedanta, and Yoga. And at any rate, he was a genius, and he finally put these in the correct order and gave us the actual protocol necessary for experiencing the last limb, or the goal of yoga. Next. And so the yamas and niyamas, I'll just go through these quickly. Ahimsa, or non-violence, satya, or truth, steya, non-stealing, brahmacharya, self-restraint, or conservation of vital energy, parigraha, non-greed, and the niyamas, saucha, or purity, santosha, contentment, tapas, self-discipline, svadhyaya, spiritual study, ishvara pranadhana, which is devotion to God. Okay? Now, these are all sort of the ethical code of yoga, and so it is said that if you are not practicing all of these, it is very difficult to progress on the spiritual path, and you will have a lot of difficulty practicing things like pranayama, pratyahara, dharna, Gianna, Samadhi. The higher practices of yoga will be incredibly difficult if we're not practicing the ethical restraints and practices. Moving on to asana. Asana is a comfortable seated position appropriate for pranayama and meditation. Historically, okay, the more modern postures didn't come around until or they weren't written down, I should say, until about the 1400s, and the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, I believe, was the first mention of specific different postures, but up till then, asana just meant a comfortable seated position, and actually, in subtext, it actually means the seat itself, like the actual seat that you sit on. And and in these texts, it was recommended that you sit on wool or animal skins. Not sure why, but that's what the yogis did. And so I'm going to go through, there's 3 verses in the Yoga Sutras that talk about asana, so I'm going to go through those real quick. So, in chapter 2, verse 46, it says, the posture of asana for yoga meditation should be steady, stable, and motionless, as well as comfortable. And this is the 3rd of the 8 rungs of yoga. Okay, so steady, stable, motionless, comfortable. Pretty straightforward. Chapter 2, verse 47, it says, the means of perfecting the posture is that of relaxing or loosening of effort and allowing attention to merge with the infinite. Okay, so the means of perfecting the posture is that of relaxing or loosening of effort and allowing attention to merge with the infinite. Okay? And verse 48 from chapter 2, from the attainment of that perfected posture, there arises an unassailable, unimpeded freedom from suffering due to the pairs of opposites, such as heat, cold, good, bad, pain, pleasure, all of this duality that we are constantly dealing with in the manifest realm. Through perfected asana, motionless, still posture, over time, with practice, we can free ourselves from the roller coaster ride. The roller coaster ride. Good, bad, up, down, happy, sad, pain, pleasure, all of these ups and downs that we're constantly experiencing, or vrittis, vibrations, right? That requires duality. For a vibration to occur, there must be an up and a down. Okay? Yeah. So the next of the limbs is, so we practice asana for the physical layer. Okay? Pranayama we practice for the pranamaya, or the energetic layer. Prana means vital energy. Ayama actually means expansion. There's a common mistranslation that does not mean restraint or control. It actually means expansion or liberation. So pranayama is actually the expansion of prana. That's what it means literally, but the actual practice itself is the expansion and stilling of prana. That is accomplished by means of various breathing exercises. Okay, so the goal of pranayama is actually to still the prana. To move it around, get it circulating, get it flowing, unrestrained, expansive. But then, at the end of the pranayama practice, the prana should be still. So the purposes of pranayama are to move prana into the central nadi, the Sushumna nadi, and move the prana towards the higher chakras, and still the prana in the higher chakras. Every ancient yoga text speaks of this, whether it be the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Yoga Sutras. They all, and this text I'm reading right now, I'm not going to go into that, but they all speak of this, okay? And the idea is to get the prana in your central channel, in the Sushumna. When the prana is in the Ida, which is the left channel, or the Pingala, which is the right channel, there's an imbalance. And actually, your prana and attention's flowing outwards toward external things, grasping for pleasures, avoiding pain. And your attention and prana is constantly flowing outward, constantly flowing outward, constantly flowing outward. You're always restless and you can't be still. When the prana is flowing in the Sushumna, in the central channel, the attention flows inward. Attention follows prana. Where the attention goes, the prana flows. Where the attention goes, the prana flows. And vice versa, actually. So when the prana is in the left and right, it's not centered, it's not balanced, it's not still. Attention and prana is flowing outward, flowing outward, flowing outward. Reaching, grasping, right? When it's in the central channel, the attention flows inward, okay, and then we can actually practice the next step, which is pratyahara, or the retirement of the senses. That's why these are in order. This is science. This is crystalline, perfected yogic science from Patanjali. But you have to know, you have to unpack it. These Yoga Sutras are very short verses. It's incomplete. It was meant to be an outline that would be unpacked by a teacher. Okay? And so this is the idea of pranayama. This creates an inner environment more conducive to meditation and high states of consciousness or being due to the reduction of vrittis, the stilling of prana. All of these practices are for reducing vrittis, for reducing vibration, fluctuations, and creating stillness, inner stillness. Pratyahara is the retirement of the senses, or the internalization of attention and awareness. Another way of saying that. We can accomplish this step by simply removing our awareness from anything external to us, which includes thoughts, emotions, desires, physical sensations, etc. We typically think of thoughts and emotions, these things, as internal things. Well, they're not. They're external to what we are, which is pure infinite consciousness. Anything that vibrates is external to our core. So to internalize awareness doesn't mean to focus on thoughts and memories and desires. No. To internalize attention and awareness means to remove attention and awareness from everything external to our Atman, or infinite consciousness. Pratyahara is also accomplished by balancing prana flows in the Ida and Pingala nadis and bringing prana into the central nadi, or Sushumna nadi. And this is actually the practice of Kriya Yoga, part of that tradition. The act of Kriya Yoga accomplishes this. That's why we do Kriya Yoga. This automatically internalizes attention and awareness. So remember this, attention follows prana and vice versa. Very, very important. Key. When attention is constantly flowing outwards, meditation is impossible. And the other steps cannot be practiced with success. So before we can even begin to practice meditation, we have to first internalize our attention and awareness. Okay? Dharna is the next step in the 8 limbs, and it means concentration. Okay, so there are different techniques for this step, such as mantra, visualization, breath awareness, listening for Om, focusing on an inner light. There's many techniques. Tantra yoga was full of these. They would visualize a specific yantra or geometric shape. There's many techniques. I prefer mantra. It's very simple, but you have to experiment, find the one that works for you. The idea is to use a dharana technique until it is no longer necessary and the mind is calm and focused. So you use a technique until you accomplish the goal. So when the vrittis, or the fluctuations, the vibrations, are stilled, you no longer need the technique. You set it aside. Okay, mantra is not meditation. If you're sitting there repeating a mantra over and over again, you're not meditating. That is a technique that you are using to get to meditation. Okay? Okay, next. Gianna. Gianna means superconscious meditation. Okay, that's what the word means. This word Gianna actually in Chinese became the word Chan, which means meditation. And then that word Chan, when it moved to Japan, became the word Zen, which also means meditation. It all comes from this Sanskrit word Gianna. So when the mind is still and calm, then we can begin to experience ourselves as other than the mind, body, and personality composite that the consciousness is constantly identified with. So we use meditation for that, but we can also use discernment, intellectual discernment. Well, the mind, body, personality, that dies. It dies. It's gone. So, therefore, perhaps we are other than that. If you believe in life after death, if you believe in the spirit, the soul, so intellectually we can figure that out, but it's not the same as direct experience. Direct experience only comes through actual meditation. So during meditation, there still might be a subtle sense of individuality, which means we have not reached our ultimate goal of samadhi, or oneness. During deep states of thoughtless meditation, we can begin to experience the healing benefits of our practice, such as deep physical relaxation, improved immune function, improved digestion, the slowing of the aging process, and the production of soma, or amrita, which is a divine nectar, spoken of in texts such as the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the Vedas, Upanishads, and others. Speak of this soma, and it's actually produced in the brain. It's a special type of saliva that drips down into the palate of the mouth. And during superconscious meditation, you can start to produce the soma, which actually eventually makes its way into the rest of your body And at that point, it's called amrita, or divine nectar.
This is from the pineal gland.
We don't know. We don't know. It's possible. It's possible that it's produced in the pineal gland. No one really knows because people don't study this stuff. You know, it's not like in the medical, Harvard Medical School. They're like, I wonder where that amrita is.
People don't do their thesis
produced.
on amrita.
So yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows? But yeah, it's something physical. It is something physical. It's real.
You can taste it.
Yeah.
So.
Next. And Samadhi, in Zen Buddhism, for example, to even try and talk about this would be sacrilegious because it's impossible to explain with words because words are based upon duality and concepts and mental things, and Samadhi is beyond all of that. But, with that said, let's talk about it. So Samadhi means oneness or union. Again, words cannot describe it, it's ineffable. But in Samadhi, we lose all sense of separate existence and realize our union and oneness with everything. There's really two types of Samadhi. Samadhi with support, Samadhi without support. Samadhi with support is union with the support of an object of contemplation, for example, Om, the Om vibration. You might be trying to listen for Om, the real Om, the subtle substratum of all manifest reality. And you're listening, you're concentrating, you're focusing, and at some point you may experience a oneness with that. So that's oneness with support. Oneness, or Samadhi without support, is just complete divine union, where your attention and awareness is completely unified with the infinite, the divine, whatever you want to call that. Okay? And yeah, this is... You can't really describe it or explain it, but you realize your oneness with everything, your individuality is gone. There is no more Chris. What's that? But, this is important to understand, Samadhi is temporary. It's temporary. So, it's a temporary experience that we have. We have it, it's great, and then it's gone. And then we're back, identified again with this form. And subject to all of its stuff, right? So the ultimate goal is to experience permanent self-knowing or self-realization. So that's a state of permanent self-knowing, permanent self-awareness, where you never return to identification with form, with the individual's separate existence. It's permanent. Even beyond that stage is complete liberation, or in Sanskrit what they call moksha. So let me explain this. So you can be self-realized or enlightened, but still performing non-useful actions. This is why, I mean, there's countless examples of, supposedly enlightened gurus who go out into the world and do really, really silly things. This is because they've not exhausted all of their karma. So they may be enlightened. They may be, what that means is they're no longer subject to accruing new karma, but they still have old karma to deal with. Okay? Once you are completely liberated, you've exhausted all of your old karma, and you're good to go. You're free. Okay, this is the theory, right?
So, for example, this what is the name of this woman? She was like all the time in Samadhi, in India.
Anandamaya.
Yeah. So was she? She was in every day. She was in Samadhi, but was she self-realized at the same time?
Yeah, yes. So she was So there's different levels of. So she was in Samadhi ecstasy all the time. Most masters find that that's not a very useful or practical way to exist. Because sometimes she couldn't like feed herself, she couldn't walk around, because she was just blissed out of her brain all the time. Is that really where you want to go? Is that the kind of existence you want to have? For her, it was great. It was fine. That was her role, that was her karma, that was her role to play. She played it, and that's fine. Most masters will tell you, I asked our guru about this, and he said, it's better to be somewhere between heaven and earth. She was in heaven all the time, just blissed out of her brain, like couldn't function. It's not a functional state to be in, this complete samadhi ecstasy all the time. However, that's one level of it, but you can still be self-knowing and self-realized and constantly self-aware without being blissed out of your brain all the time. So you want to be able to function on earth, especially if you're a householder, you have responsibilities, duties to fulfill. That's not a very functional state to be in if you're a householder. She wasn't a householder, so she could be totally blissed out all the time. So they called her the blissed out mother. Yeah.
Was she a mother? Was she a
No,
parent?
mother in the sense of like a spiritual.
And how was she cared for? You said some.
Her husband. She was married. She had and actually he was her devotee, like he was her student. He was her. So he. Yeah, and people sometimes had to feed her, take care of her, hold on to her to like walk her around. So she wasn't always like that, but sometimes she was just so out of it, And when I asked my guru about that, he's like, yeah, you don't want to be out of it. He's like, you don't want to be so out of it you can't function. It's like you want to be somewhere between heaven and earth. It's pretty practical, it's good, wholesome advice.
So with all these gurus, around the world and all these spiritual teachers, how do you know who is self-realized?
I have no idea. I don't, it's not really for me to say.
Like for anyone that is looking for a spiritual teacher.
A spiritual teacher gives off an energy called Shaktipat, which is an energy that you can feel in their presence. And so it's a feeling of sort of like omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. It's a power, spiritual power, that you can feel in the presence of an awakened master. So that's one clear indication. Another clear indication is how they live their life. How do they act in the world? How do they treat people? How do they behave? Also, what do they teach? You can use, the more you meditate, the clearer your discernment becomes until it's like we call that viveka, Sanskrit viveka, discernment, until it becomes like a razor blade, and you can read something, and you know immediately if it's frou-frou garbage, or if it's legit, real, enlightened teachings. And so the more you meditate, the more you develop viveka, it becomes like a razor blade. And so you can read the writings of a teacher, you can hear their lectures, and you can know immediately if what they're saying is legit or if they're full of it. So I would say from their teachings, from their writings, from their physical presence, being in their presence, do they give off this Shaktipat energy? And from their actions and behaviors out in the world. These are three pretty clear indicators. And there's different levels of guru too. Nobody's perfect. And so that's the most important thing to understand about gurus. They're not perfect. And so there's a giant continuum of enlightenment and different levels and stages of enlightenment. They're all operating from a different stage within that continuum. And so we have to understand from the outset that nobody's perfect. These people are not perfect. They're humans. They're still on planet Earth. If they were perfect, they'd be floating around in a causal realm somewhere. Okay. So this is the crux of what I wanted to talk about: the relationship between the 5 koshas and the 8 limbs. So we use the steps in the 8 limbs to balance, still, and transcend each layer of our being, until we reach the Atman, or infinite soul, and experience oneness with our essence of being, which is unbounded infinite consciousness. So, for the Anandamaya Kosha, for the physical layer, the physical sheath, we use asana. We use a physical practice. We stretch our muscles, and we do different asanas so that we relax the muscles in the nervous system. again, these are all interconnected. And actually, when we do stretching, it literally sends a signal through the nervous system to the brain that tells the body to relax. That's why stretching is so good for you. Okay? So we do a lot of stretching and strengthening exercises too for the spine. Really, asana is all about the spine. It's all about strengthening the spine so you can sit for a long time without being uncomfortable. I mean, literally, that's why it was invented. Okay? Pranamaya Kosha, the energetic sheath, we use Pranayama. Again, to still the flows of prana and to get that prana in the central Sushumna channel. And this helps with the stilling of energies, emotions, but it also helps with the pratyahara, the internalization of the prana, attention, awareness becomes internalized, and it's not always flowing outward, flowing outward. The Anandamaya Kosha, the mental sheath, we actually use two. We use two of the steps, two of the limbs. We use pratyahara, which again is the retirement of the senses or the internalization of attention and awareness. And we use Dharna, which is a focusing technique, such as mantra, visualization, listening for Om. And any of these techniques, they help us reach our goal. Okay? Breath awareness, just simply watching the breath. It's a great Dharna technique. Probably the simplest, okay? And so, we've transcended the body, the physical body. We've transcended the energetic body, we've stilled it. Now we've stilled the mind, the mental layer. So we move on to the Vijnanamaya Kosha. And for the Vijnanamaya Kosha, we use Gianna. Gianna again means meditation, super conscious meditation actually. Okay? So here we're using super conscious meditation to transcend our sense of individual existence, our sense of individuality, the ego self that we're consistently identified with, that 99.99999% of human beings are always identified with.